Most women would have broken the day he called her by her first name, but Teresa only smiled. A thin, sad smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes but still keeps the peace. The kind of smile you wear when you're being erased, inch by inch, by the very hands you once held as a baby. She had saved every penny for him. Every coupon clipped, every shift worked late, every meal skipped when he was growing. They used to live in a small apartment with paper-thin walls and dreams too loud for the neighbors. She remembered the nights she'd massage her aching feet in the kitchen sink, humming lullabies while boiling water for another day-old noodle soup. Because he needed shoes. Because he needed braces. Because he needed a future. And Teresa, she never needed anything except to see him shine. But you know how these stories go, don't you? You've seen it happen to someone. Or maybe you've been them, the one who gave too much, who loved past the line of self-respect. The one who believed that sacrifice earns loyalty. But here's the thing, they don't tell you children grow into mirrors. And sometimes the reflection looking back isn't love, it's entitlement. Daniel was the kind of son other mothers admired. Polite in public, clean-cut, clever. Oh, he'd pat Teresa's hand at church like she was a beloved aunt. Smiled for the photos. Said thanks, Mom, with just enough charm to keep the illusion afloat. But in private, there were cracks. Subtle at first. A dismissive tone, a forgotten birthday, a conversation about selling her house, her home, phrased like a done deal. Teresa didn't protest. Not then. You might think she was weak, but no, she was patient. She believed in him, or maybe she believed in who he used to be. Before the expensive wife, before the lifestyle upgrades, before his tone started echoing his father's, that cold, clipped detachment that always made her feel like furniture in her own life. The wife, Elise, was all sharp smiles and soft threats. The kind of woman who builds her kingdom on image, the perfect home, the curated Instagram family, the expensive Montessori preschool for their daughter. Elise never outright said Teresa was in the way. She didn't have to. She said things like, "Your mom means well. She's just not modern." It's hard for her to let go. Let go of what? Of her son. Of the years she'd folded herself small to fit into their lives. When Daniel suggested the residence, he framed it like a gift. "It's a nice place, Mom. Not a nursing home. It's independent living. You'll love the view. They even do art classes." He said it like a vacation, like she hadn't already painted for years in the sunlight of her own kitchen, thank you very much. But Teresa didn't argue. You might be wondering why. Why not scream? Why not beg? Why not throw his ungrateful face into the mirror and ask him who he sees now? Because Teresa had learned long ago in the quiet of that broken marriage and the silences between her sacrifices that some battles are lost not in noise, but in indifference. And if your child can look at you and not see home, not see the woman who gave everything, then maybe it's already too late. The move was quick. One weekend, 2 boxes. Daniel handled it like a task. Elise didn't even come. And Teresa? She watched from the window as her old house faded into the background, wondering how a lifetime could fit in 2 boxes and a smile that never cracked. The residence was clean, polite staff, soft food, room 312. She unpacked her boxes in silence. But here's what you didn't see. You didn't see the journal hidden in the bottom of the second box. Every receipt, every sacrifice, every broken promise cataloged in neat, shaking cursive. You didn't see the glint in her eyes when she looked in the mirror that first night and whispered, "Now we begin." Because sometimes the woman you abandon is the one who knows your secrets best, and sometimes she doesn't stay silent forever. For the first few weeks, Teresa didn't speak much to the other residents. She kept to herself, quietly present in the corner of the library, sketching charcoal portraits that nobody requested but everyone secretly stared at. There was something in the way she drew eyes too much, knowing too much sorrow. It made people uneasy, like her art was staring back. She received 2 calls from Daniel in the first month. One was a voicemail, the other lasted 4 minutes. Both were filled with superficial warmth and practical distance. "How's the food?" "We're swamped, but Elise says hi. Let me know if you need anything." But you know how people say that, right? Let me know if you need anything. It's not a question. It's a shield. It's code for, I've done enough. And Teresa, she'd finally stopped asking. She watched the seasons change from behind glass. Autumn came like a slow unraveling. Trees stripped bare 1 leaf at a time. No drama, just surrender. The staff came to love her in that quiet way reserved for those who ask for nothing. She never complained, never interrupted. smiled when spoken to, but always returned to her sketches like she was sketching her way out of her own life. But inside, oh inside, she was a thunderstorm in a velvet box. Because here's what you don't understand unless you've been left behind. There's a different kind of anger that brews when the pain isn't fresh anymore. It's not about betrayal, it's about being discarded, forgotten like a coat someone outgrew. You think that pain fades? No, it matures. And Teresa's pain had teeth now. She began to write letters, not to send, but to keep. One for each birthday missed, one for each memory rewritten by Elise's version of Daniel's past, one for the time she pawned her mother's locket so he could go on the school trip to Washington, one for the night she found out through a staff member that her granddaughter had turned 3 and there had been a party princess-themed photos all over social media. Except her. Not even a text. She pasted the pictures into her notebook anyway. She labeled them the family I made, the one I no longer fit in. You feel that twist in your chest. Good. Sit with it. Ask yourself what kind of child forgets the hands that once wiped. His tears cleaned his sheets, stood in line for formula when he was sick. Ask yourself if love when abused can still call itself love. One night, a new resident arrived, Mr. Kellerman, a retired lawyer with a raspy voice and a talent for chess. He noticed her instantly. Not in a romantic way, no. More like a man who's seen war recognizes another survivor. They began to play in the afternoons, silent, precise games. She never let him win, and he never asked her to. During their third match, he said something that stayed in her bones. Some children inherit your eyes, Teresa. Others inherit your silence. Be careful which you reward. That night, she stopped sketching and started planning. Because Teresa hadn't just raised a son. She had also spent 3 decades managing finances, accounts, legal papers. Her ex-husband had never cared to learn she had done it all. Quietly, competently. And Daniel. He never asked where the money came from. He just assumed it would always be there. But he didn't know about the trust. He didn't know that Teresa had moved her savings into a fund he couldn't touch, not without her consent. He didn't know she had updated the beneficiary just a year before the move. And he didn't know who it was now. So when the letter came, crisp envelope, no return address delivered to Daniel's law office, he opened it with mild curiosity and froze. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a copy of the revised will. At the bottom in sharp ink, "This is not revenge. It's recognition. You made it clear where I belong. I'm just adjusting accordingly." You could almost hear the crack in his ego, the tiny fracture that forms when a man realizes the thing he took for granted was never really his. Because here's the truth, when a mother reclaims her silence, it becomes a sword. Daniel didn't reply to the letter. Not immediately. He sat with it, read it 3 times, then folded it and slipped it into the drawer beneath a pile of meaningless contracts. But the words festered. He told no one, not Elise, not his colleagues, not even the accountant who casually asked if his mother needed assistance with her estate. No, this wasn't a legal issue. This was personal. But Elise could sense the shift in him. She always could, even if she pretended otherwise. One night, while tucking their daughter into bed, she caught him staring out the window, silent and stiff, jaw clenched like a man digesting poison. "She's fine, you know," Elise offered casual. "The place is clean, safe. She should be grateful." That word, grateful. What does it mean when people expect you to thank them for discarding you? Back in room 312, Teresa moved like a woman with time. She joined the garden club, helped organize an exhibit of resident art. Her sketches took center stage. One of them, a faceless woman holding a child who was already walking away, made people stop mid-step. Her work began circulating among the staff's family, then the local paper. A soft-spoken reporter visited one afternoon curious about the artist grandmother, whose portraits feel like open wounds. Teresa didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Her eyes said enough. You see, power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it walks into a sterile room, fills it with grace, and lets people wonder how they ever overlooked it. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel's calls grew less frequent. His texts turned transactional. Elise sent a Christmas card, generic, pre-signed, with a group photo from their ski trip to Aspen. No one called on Teresa's birthday, but someone did knock on her door. A young woman, early 20s, nervous hands, wearing a thrifted coat and holding a canvas. "Are you Teresa Herrera?" she asked, cheeks flushed. I found your sketch in the gallery. I think you drew my mother once." Teresa squinted, then smiled. Recognition flickered. A child from the neighborhood grown now, one of the forgotten girls who used to play hopscotch outside her stoop, while Teresa kept cold lemonade and extra Band-Aids on hand. That visit led to another, and another. Suddenly Teresa wasn't alone. Former students, neighbors, even an old friend from church people who remembered who she was, not who she had become in her son's curated world. They came bearing flowers, stories, hugs that lasted a little too long. Her room, once sterile and quiet, now bloomed with warmth, with evidence that her life hadn't been in vain. And Daniel, he only saw the social media post. A photo someone tagged her in Teresa, seated in her wheelchair, surrounded by guests, a birthday cake in front of her, tears in her eyes. The caption read, "Some mothers never stop giving. Some finally receive." You'd think that would move him. But guilt, when left to rot, turns to resentment. He told himself she was being manipulative, that she was making a show, that she never appreciated how hard he worked. But you and I both know that's not what it was. He was afraid that she'd found joy without his permission, afraid that the woman he'd left behind was no longer waiting. One day he visited, unannounced. He brought flowers, the kind you buy from a gas station in a hurry. He walked into the lobby like a stranger, paused by her door and knocked with the sheepishness of a man unsure of his welcome. Teresa looked up from her chair book in hand. No sketches today, no guests, just the hum of her radio and a window cracked open to let the breeze in. "Oh," she said, calm, measured. "You remembered where I live?" He blinked. "Mom, But the words got lost. Because there she was, older, yes, and thinner, but upright, composed. A woman no longer chasing approval. She didn't invite him in, didn't rise, just studied him like a puzzle she'd already solved. "I didn't come to argue," he muttered. "I just thought we could talk." "About what?" she asked, voice soft. "The past you edited or the future you assumed you'd inherit?" He flinched. You ever see a grown man realize that he's not the center of someone's universe anymore? It's a quiet devastation. You don't mean that, he said, almost begging. But she didn't answer. She just turned her gaze to the window, the light catching the silver in her hair like a crown. And Daniel he left with the flowers still in his hands. Spring came with a vengeance. The trees outside room 312 burst into bloom, thick with pink blossoms that looked almost gaudy against the sterile backdrop of the facility. Teresa watched the petals fall like confetti one by one, celebrating something only she understood. You see, nature does not ask for permission to grow back. It just does, silently, fiercely. And Teresa, she was blooming too. She'd started teaching a weekly art class. Just a few residents at first, then nurses, then a few local teenagers who'd heard about the grandmother artist with eyes like iron. They came to sketch, but they stayed for her stories, the ones she rarely told. But when she did, they came out like smoke from a fire long suppressed. And every now and then she'd glance at the clock around 6 p.m. That used to be Daniel's dinner time. Used to be when he'd text, "How was your day?" out of obligation. Now the silence was clean, not empty, peaceful. No more waiting. No more hunger for crumbs. One afternoon she received a visitor, but it wasn't Daniel, it wasn't Elise. It was Elise's mother. Her name was Marianne, tall, elegant, the kind of woman who wore expensive scarves and walked like she expected the world to make room for her. But her eyes were tired. And when she sat across from Teresa, she didn't pretend. "I know what my daughter is," Marianne said bluntly, "and I know what she's done." Teresa raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" "She's always needed a scapegoat. First me, then her teachers, then you." Marianne looked down at her gloves. "You were too quiet. Too giving. She never respected that. She thought you were weak." Teresa said nothing. "Daniel's not innocent either," Marianne added, voice tight. "But he's not cruel. Just moldable. And Elise? She's the sculptor." Teresa finally spoke. Then he chose poorly. "And I paid the price." They sat in silence. Two women, both mothers, both exiled in different ways. Finally, Marianne looked up. "I came to say thank you. For the way you raised him. For the part of him that was good once." Teresa gave a small smile. "It's still there, somewhere, but it doesn't belong to me anymore." Marianne reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "This is a letter I wrote Elise. She'll never read it. But maybe one day your granddaughter will. You deserve better than the silence they gave you." After she left, Teresa didn't cry. She simply placed the envelope in her journal next to her own letters, a growing archive of grief, resilience, and now perhaps healing. But life has a cruel sense of rhythm. Because a week later she received news. Daniel had been laid off, his firm downsized. Elise's boutique was hemorrhaging money. The Aspen trips had stopped. The nanny had been let go. The car sold. The Instagram perfect life was cracking like porcelain, and behind every curated filter was the same truth dependency. And guess who they came running to? It started with a text. "Hey Mom, could we talk? Things are complicated." Then a call. "We might need help just for a little while. You know, until things stabilize." But Teresa didn't answer. Not out of vengeance. No. Out of clarity. She knew now that her silence wasn't weakness. It was her boundary. A week later, Daniel arrived again. No Elise this time. Just him and a desperate look that didn't suit him. He brought papers, financial documents, proposals, a temporary transfer of funds. He spoke quickly, hands trembling. Used words like sacrifice, family legacy. But Teresa had heard it all before, in a different voice, from a different man, a long time ago. And that's when she realized she hadn't just been discarded. She'd been reenacting a pattern. Her ex-husband had taken, Daniel had taken, and for years she'd confused love with provision. Not anymore. She waited until he was done speaking, then rose slowly with the same poise she'd once used to stand after 14-hour shifts, bruised feet and broken heart, hidden behind a soft apron smile. "Daniel," she said, voice like velvet over steel, "you're not my responsibility anymore." His mouth opened, closed, like a child denied a toy he thought was his by birthright. "I gave you life, then I gave you mine. That was my mistake. This—" She gestured to the door. "This is me correcting it." He left without the papers signed. And this time, he didn't look back. Teresa didn't sleep that night. Not out of regret, but because something inside her had shifted for good. It wasn't grief. It wasn't rage. It was release. She walked the halls of the residence as moonlight filtered through the long windows, casting ghostly shapes across the floor. A nurse nodded as she passed. Teresa smiled, a real one this time. No bitterness, no irony, just a quiet, knowing peace. The next morning she called the bank, not to transfer money, to donate it. She established a scholarship fund for underprivileged girls with artistic talent. She named it after her own mother, the one who used to sketch with broken crayons on brown grocery bags. The one Teresa had buried with a rose and a promise, "I'll make something of this life, Mama. I'll give it back." And now she finally was. The first award letter went out that spring. A 16-year-old girl from a neighborhood not unlike the one Teresa once cleaned floors and crying over the phone as she read the news. "I didn't think people like me mattered," the girl whispered. Teresa's voice didn't waver. "You do. You always did." Word spread. The same daughter-in-law who once called her old-fashioned now scrambled to reclaim contact. Elise sent flowers, emails, even asked for a reunion for the sake of the family. But Teresa had learned that some doors once closed are meant to stay that way. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because forgiveness does not always require access. Daniel tried once more. Just once. He showed up during one of her art classes, standing awkwardly in the doorway watching as she guided a resident through a watercolor technique. She saw him, didn't pause, didn't acknowledge. She let him wait. Let him see who she'd become without him. And when the class ended, she walked past him like smoke untouchable. He called her name. She turned, just briefly. "You are my son," she said, "but I've learned how to grow in the shade." That was the last time they saw each other. Years passed. Her legacy outgrew the little room where it began. A local gallery hosted her first solo exhibition, Inheritance, A Mother's Eye. Critics wept in front of her faceless family portraits. Students came in droves to hear her speak. Not loudly, not often. But when she did, it was with the weight of 1,000 unshed tears transformed into wisdom. Her granddaughter came when she was 9. Elise had divorced Daniel by then. He'd become quieter, thinner, a ghost of ambition with no empire to rule. But the little girl, she came alone, with a staff member chaperoning, holding a small bundle of charcoal drawings she'd made for school. "I want to draw like you," she whispered. "Dad says you're scary, but I think you're beautiful." Teresa smiled then, not a grandmotherly smile, a woman's smile, a survivor's. She took the girl's hand, showed her how to shade with shadows, how to draw light into the darkest corners. She didn't talk about Daniel. She didn't need to. The girl would learn in her own time. That summer, Teresa moved into a brighter room, one with morning light that spilled across her desk, catching every line in her sketchbooks like the truth made visible. And sometimes she still looked out the window at twilight where the petals would fall again. But this time, she didn't wonder about her worth. She knew it. She had always known it in the quiet parts of her soul, the parts she used to trade away for scraps of affection, for borrowed praise, for illusions of love. But not anymore. She didn't rise by begging. She didn't win by fighting. She simply remembered who she was and chose to live like it. The woman who knows her worth doesn't beg, she watches. Then she rises,